There are so many times in our lives when we can use looking back and reflecting on things to slap ourselves, to berate ourselves, and to make ourselves feel bad, and to play the would've, could've, should've, or the second guessing game. And I've got to say this, hindsight is 2020, right? You can see things now that you couldn't see then. And so I just want to discuss that today in this video to try and help you get past all of that sort of thing in your life. Hi, I'm Suze. I'm a 50-something woman having a lot of time to, reflect, look at, gather all the parts of me from the previous 50 years that I've lived, pick up some wisdom, put down some of the mess, and launch into my second half of life freer and more able to feel joy and less busy and less, there's a lot of less in my life right now. So I want to share some things with you that may help you if you're in your 20s and 30s. It may help you in your 50s just to settle in. It might help a friend. It might just be something that plants in you that one day something will happen, and it may help you just a little bit. So if I can help anyone, that's a bonus. So when we reflect back, we look back at things, we can look back with, like I said, 2020 vision, with the knowledge that we have now, that we've gained since that thing happened, and we can look back at it and we can slap ourselves for not seeing the possibilities, the other choices, the different way, not being able to see the future of what that choice was going to land up for not only us, but those around us, those closest to us, those involved within the situation, right? And we can use that to slap ourselves. But does that do anything? No. I talked in the last video about not having regrets and how I worked really hard on that. And one of the things that I did was, in the 6 months before I turned 50, I worked with a life coach, and I got down to the bare bones of stuff that I did not want to take with me into the next 50 years. You know, I've always said that the first 50 years of my life I cried more tears than I care to remember in lots of different areas of my life, and I think I've cried enough tears now the next 50 years. I didn't want to have all of that just rinse, repeat, keep going along. So I made a conscious effort to meet all the parts of me in that 6 months before I turned 50 that I had shunned, that I had put aside, that people had told me weren't right, that didn't fit, that people had shamed me for or laughed at me for or bullied me for. And so I'd put those in that little corner cupboard, you know, that one that's in your heart, that's inside of you, where we store our hurts, our shames, our wounds, our parts of us that, society says don't fit. At some point, though, that cupboard gets really full, and even though you've got 60 chains and 50 locks and 5 blankets over that, eventually that's going to rock and shake and come open. And it usually comes open at one of the worst times in your life, when you're having a catalyst moment, for instance, and no longer can everything be held in and it starts to come out. Now, what if you weren't to wait for that, though? What if you bravely went and took your keys and opened all the locks and sat down and planted yourself there and opened the cupboard and looked at some of those parts of you? What would happen? Sounds scary. And I'm not going to lie, it is scary, right? It is scary. But at the end of the day, those are parts of you. And I'll go a step further and say those are parts of you that maybe you have only rejected because other people have told you to reject them, right? So when you sit here, you don't sit here in someone else's eyes. You don't sit here with somebody else that you're talking to. You do this alone, or like I said, I started the process with a life coach. And I did that because she is neutral. She was neutral, right? While I did know her because I trained with her when I did my life coaching, she didn't know a lot about me. And she's not someone who's in my everyday life or my semi-everyday life that is likely to rock up and have coffee and mention anything. I felt safe to share everything as it was, warts and all, without fear of anything coming out that didn't need to come out. It was a totally private space for me to go. So I felt quite safe in that, because I don't know about you, but in my first 50 years of life, I had a lot of confidences that were betrayed by people who just couldn't hold that level of whatever it was that was going on at the time, right? So getting back to this little cupboard, and this little cupboard that is stuffed full of the parts of you that you would rather pretend don't exist, right? Or that you only let out on certain occasions around certain people who are quite free enough for you to expose them. But you may not be letting them out in their whole freeness that they want to let out. So they're still in that cupboard, right? So I want to talk to you about that, because as scary as it sounds, and the first couple of times that you do this, it is terrifying as hell, I'm not going to lie, and you'll want to just get up and run, and you'll want to just play the would have, could have, should have game, and you'll want to not look it in the eye. But I'm telling you, the best way to do this is just to look whatever part first comes to you in the eye and look at it. But look at it as somebody that you don't know, right? And look at it as it is. Don't try and put a story on it. Don't try and do anything to it. Just let it be what it is, what it was, that experience, whatever it was, right? Let it come to you. Let it speak to you. Let it move through you. Because quite often, the things that we hide in that cupboard are so full of emotional charge because we didn't feel the real feelings that we wanted to feel or that needed to be felt before we put them in the cupboard. And all of that grows like a little volcano, right? And so you may cry, you may scream, you may feel a multitude of things. Depending on what I was looking at the time, I felt all sorts of stuff. But when I made myself look at it, I realised this is an aspect of me, a part of me. This was me, right? And so gradually, as I went through the stuff in the cupboard, the parts of me I'd hidden, and when I look back at the stories and the reasons why I'd hidden that, I was able to deal with it differently now because I've lived a lot of life since then. I've seen a lot of different perspectives since then. I see a lot of different views since then. And the lived wisdom and experience that I had gained allowed me to not only reclaim those parts of me, right, as they were, not dressed up, not made up, not edited, but fully claimed those parts of me and the decisions that I'd made and the mistakes I'd made and the hurts I'd caused and all the things. Not only was I able to reclaim those, but I was able to give that version of me what she needed at that time, which was a voice, a way to express, some air to be seen for what she was. Now, we can do all sorts of things and we can make all sorts of excuses why. And I'd made lots of excuses for lots of the parts of me that I had hidden. And I thought I knew why I had done a lot of the things that I'd done. But within this coaching and within this space that I then continued to hold weekly for myself, I began to see that the reasons I thought I did the things that I did were not actually the reasons for the things that I thought I did. The reasons why I'd put those pieces in the cupboard may have seemed black and white at the time, but there was more to it than just that. Does that make sense? And so I had to revisit some pretty hard and harsh things that I'd thought about myself and the ways that I'd treated those parts of myself in order to let them stand before me and speak as they were. Does this all make sense? I hope it does. It's so hard to put into words because it was hard. I can't tell you how hard this was, but I can't tell you how important and what a turning point in my life this was. Because we've always got skeletons in the closet, right? And we can look at other people's lives and pick and poke and say what we would have done and should have done and what they could have done better and all of that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, sometimes until you're in a situation, you don't know what it feels like. You don't know how blinding it feels or how you feel like you're drowning or how you just fight to get any sense of yourself back in a situation, right? So all of those things can be in our cupboards. And so once I started to, how I explained it to somebody was that I had a kumbaya moment where I let each part of me have the talking stick. I just sat down and envisioned all the parts of me around the circle and I let them all pass the talking stick round. So I talk in metaphors, so. And as those parts of me spoke, I cried for them, I grieved for them, I loved them, like I said, reclaimed them, I accepted them back, I accepted that these are all parts of me. And something about doing that made me feel whole again and made me see how these parts of me, while they might have been rejected at the time, were aspects of me that make me me, right? But I've also lived enough life, and I've done some coaching training, and I have spoken to and coached and been in many circles of different things to see that sometimes these parts of us that we've put back in that cupboard, we loved. We liked to be them. We thought they were the best parts of us sometimes. But they got put in the cupboard because other people didn't view them that way. And that can happen for a multitude of reasons. People can be jealous. People can feel like you feel like you're better than them. People can feel all sorts of ways about you, and so they can stomp on you so that you won't do that, so that then they feel more comfortable. Does that make sense? This can happen in all sorts of ways. It can happen with family members. It can happen with friends. It can happen with work people. It can happen in any aspect of your life, in sporting places, in all sorts of places. It can happen. And those parts of us that are then wounded, and we feel like, oh God, I don't want to feel like that again. I'm going to put it away. We put it away. So this video is encouraging you. Don't wait for a catalyst moment where the ground shakes and your locks and keys burst open and parts and experiences of you come out and cause you so much drama that you can't even deal. I'm encouraging you to walk up to that cupboard as you approach whatever part of your life you're in, and sit down and open it up and see what comes out first to be dealt with, and sit there bravely and deal with it and let it speak, and see how you view it now once you see it for what it is, for what it was, right? We talk about fragments and soul fragmentation sometimes, and that's where little parts of us get left behind. And I've been on a quest to backtrack, and I did that for, like I said, the 6 months before I turned 50, but also the first probably 2 years of my 50s. I re-walked back through my life and picked up those pieces, and then I walked through it again forwards, and I dealt with my inner child. I dealt with it through my inner teenager, and the teenage years were where I got most of my wounds from, and where I picked up the most of my pieces from that I had thrown away, because high school is hard. Teenage years are hard. And so I have then walked back through my life and given love to these parts of me, and let them breathe and let them be, and brought them with me through to now, my almost 55-ness. What that's given me is a lightness, a freedom. I was able to lose weight, physical weight off my body when I dealt with these emotional weights. And now the amount of joy that I can feel even in my worst moments is just, I can't even explain it to you. I have days every day, regardless of how bad the day is. And I've had some pretty shitty days, I've got to say, where things don't go right, where things feel heavy, where things are yuck, where everything feels like you're wading through mud. I still have those, right? More often than I would really like. But even on those days, I have those moments where I'm like, man, if this is my life, I cannot believe this is my life. I cannot believe how different I feel now than I felt back then. I can't believe the stuff I've dealt with. I can't believe that I now love myself for the first time. In my 50s is the first time I loved and accepted every part of me. And once I loved and accepted every part of me, like I said, my body, I didn't like my face, I didn't like my teeth, I didn't like my voice, I didn't like my big butt, I didn't like my body, once I accepted all those parts of me and started giving them love, not because they were deserving of love, but because I loved them as they were, not because I'd done stuff to deserve love, but because I loved them as they were, as they are, and started giving them gratitude for all the things that they'd given me. Suddenly, I don't see them as flaws or anything anymore, because I've dealt with all the parts of me that had made them seem unacceptable to me. I hope this makes sense. I share this only because it's the only way I know how to share it. that's relatable to me is by speaking of how I did it. I'm not saying this is how you'll do it. I'm not saying this is how everybody does it. I'm not saying this is even a way to do it. But this is the way that I did it because I made a conscious decision after several catalyst moments in my life sent me flying down the rabbit hole of who are you. And now, from that, I have decided to just be me, as a whole me, and without looking for acceptance or validation from anyone, right? Does that mean I'll walk around and stomp on people and do bad shit and just think about myself in a selfish way? No, it so doesn't. But I say no now to things I wouldn't have said no to before because that little scared person in there said no once and there was all hell to pay. You know, that little other scared person in there used to say yes to everybody because she felt like that's how she had to get validation. You know, there were other parts of me in there that felt like that was my job for my whole life, was to just walk on eggshells and make everything right for everybody else. But she was in the corner crying because she was sad, because she felt like she didn't count. She didn't ever speak up to say what she preferred. So now, with all of those parts of me together, I'm just my best self. And I know who I am now without everybody else telling me who I am. And when other people tell me who I am, you know, from their version, that's great. That's what you see. That's what you take from it. That's everything else, whatever. But that doesn't affect me now. I no longer pull that part away and put it in the cupboard because somebody said that it wasn't acceptable. And what I've found from doing this is I have met people like me, right? I have met people who are like me and who accept me for me and I accept them for them. And we don't compete and we don't stacks on each other and we don't point out flaws. We don't talk about people either. We talk about expansion and doing new things and trying new things and get excited for each other and, confirmation verb. And that's a beautiful place to be, and especially a beautiful place to be in your 50s when you are entering a new season, when you are finding that you are less busy and you're less tied to people and you've lived more life now. Like if you don't use all of that to now sit down and reframe some things about your life, then you're wasting your life. When we can reframe stuff, when we can see stuff, when we can look at it from a different view, from a higher view, from a lived wisdom view, sometimes we can see that one way that we saw that from may not have been the way that it was. It was how we saw it with our limited life, right? But it may not be how it was intended to be, or it may be exactly how that was intended to be. But then you can realise that is not a you thing to carry with you. That is not a you thing. That's a them thing. That's how they chose to deal with it. How are you going to choose to deal with it? I also talk about line in the sand a bit because there was a time where there was so much going on that I just had to draw a line in the sand and turn my back to everything and just walk forward and find an equilibrium from which to be able to come back in bite-sized pieces and be able to visit that closet, that cupboard, that hidden stuff. Because if you are in fight or flight or survival or coming out of a really, really rough catalyst moment in your life, you don't have the equilibrium with which to visit those and come back to that equilibrium. You have to find a new equilibrium first in your life, a new baseline, a new thing. Get yourself, breathing, eating well, finding a semblance of normality in your life, get out of that fight or flight, get your body back to a place where you can actually think, where you're not thinking in fear, where you're not thinking in rage, where you're not all of those things, where you can click, so that then you can find a safe space to do what I've talked about earlier in the video. I hope this is helpful. I really want other people to know it's okay to feel all the things that you feel. It's okay to be where you are. It's okay. You're not a screw up. You're not doing it wrong. You're not doing it wrong. Right? There is no doing life right. There's just doing life your way, right? We are all individual. We've got individual footprints. We've got that too. We've got individual fingerprints, individual essences, and individual reasons why we've come to Earth, I believe. And if we all get in lockstep with each other and just do everything the same, our individualness disappears. And sometimes the roughest start to life, or the life that, the decade in your life where you made decisions that just seemed to stacks on you and you just couldn't do it right, and then you just gave up and made, just times in my life where I've made stupid decisions to make a point, when people thought I was just Miss Goody Two-Shoes, and I just stepped out and did stupid stuff so that people wouldn't think I was Little Miss Perfect, because I certainly wasn't, but that was a mask that I held there for a long time, right? We can have years, decades, months, weeks, 20 years, of doing it a certain way, and then we can decide we don't want to do it that way anymore. But you won't get anywhere if you don't take the message from the mess and put the mess down and then take the message with you. And sometimes the message that you get is just, I won't do that again. I don't know. So as I was saying, nobody knows what they're doing in life, right? This is not like a job where you can go and train for 3 or 4 years in a university degree and get all of the stuff and then go to that job and know what you're doing. We live life forward, but we understand it backwards. And so we are always in a new part of life that we haven't trained for. But if we look back and stop, we can see that we've got tools and ways that we can move forward and give ourselves the best chance at a joyous, happy life. If we fall down, we can get back up again. We don't have to stay down in the pity party. There's not a specific amount of time that you have to grieve that mistake you made before you can move on to the next, right? You can decide, I'm going to get up today and I'm just going to move forward from that. And I'll come back at some point when I'm stronger and check it out and look it over and see what I can get out of it. But right now I need to move forward, because I'm not going to lose the rest of my life and the best of my life for what's happened previously. Okay, hope this is helpful. Thank you for tuning in. If you think this can help somebody that you know, please share it. If you think that you want to see more content like this, please subscribe. And thank you for spending time with me. Okay, love you. Take care.